everyone. So my name is Quanisha Medina, and I will be briefly teaching you about the DOK system, which is also known as the Depths of Knowledge by Webb's. The DOK system can be used for planning, it can be used for assessments, and also asking your scholars questions. This is to help you to really see, just like an exit ticket, if your scholars are retaining the information that you're teaching. There are 4 levels within the DOK system. It's said that the levels are not, so level 1 isn't like harder than level 4. The 4 levels is just to test. It's on like a surface to see how well your scholars are retaining the knowledge that you're giving to them. So it's to test how deeply they know the content. So let's take a look at our levels. So as I said before, there are 4 levels. They're used for you to plan, to question, and to assess your scholars on how well they know the subject that you're teaching. So for the DOK system, I know last year while I was teaching first grade, I would use the DOK system for, let's say, a read aloud. So if I was reading the Holy Bible to my scholars, I would use the DOK system to ask them questions about what we were reading. Or in guided reading, if we were all reading on a subject, I would use the DOK system to test to see how well they were retaining what we were learning. So for example, if we were to enter level 1, I would simply ask them questions that would like define a word or something that we just read. Level 1 would also be using prior knowledge, things that they already know. Level 1 is easily just naming, quoting, summarizing what they read or summarizing what you taught. It could be math, it could be reading, it could be writing. So you could use the DOK system for any subject to assess and see if your scholars are retaining the information. So level 1, I call it the know section because it's like what you know. It's going back to their prior knowledge. It's having them name off things that you just recently went over in a text, or having them recite words or key phrases or things of that sort. Level 2, it gets a little deeper where they start to use their skills and concepts within the book or within, if you're teaching mathematics. I keep referring to books because I usually use the DOK system when I'm teaching guided reading. So with level 2, they usually apply, observe, classify, compare. They can determine the different things that they read about. How could they solve or use or convert something? So level 2 is starting to apply what they read. And so, for example, if they were reading a book, just to observe, and they can look at the pictures like what's happening in this scene. So for example, let's grab a book here. So I have my Bible. If I just read a story to my scholars, level 1 would just be, what is the main character's name? Or level 2 would be, why did the main character get upset? It'll start to have them to apply what they just read and go back and review what they just recently read. Number 3 is also piggybacking off of number 2. It's having them cite, having them look for evidence, explaining. So it'll start to get verbal where they explain how or why something is happening. And then our last level comes to level 4, where the scholars, my favorite level, starts to connect. So they think beyond what you're teaching. So for example, if you're teaching mathematics, you can say, well, how could, for example, right now I'm teaching number bonds with my first graders. How could knowing how to do a number bond correctly help you in real life? And for example, a lot of my scholars were like, well, it teaches us how to count, and so we can go to the store and buy things. So it's helping them connect beyond what they're learning. Or for example, if we're reading a story out of our Bible, because I work at a Christian school, if we're reading a story out of the Bible, and let's say maybe we talked about Noah, his story, they would make a connection beyond what they just read about Noah. So level 1 would be, who's the main character? Noah is the main character. Why did God choose Noah? Why did God tell Noah to build a boat? God chose Noah because he was good. He was the only one that was being good. Level 3 would be how, Noah built the boat using bricks or whatever he used. They would go back to the text, cite the evidence, which page they seen it on. And then level 4 would be going beyond the text. So they could say something like, oh, well, because Noah was so good and God saved him and his family, that tells me that I need to be good in my classroom, at home. So it's making those connections beyond where they are. So the DOK system, number 1 is just for like basic skills, what they already know. Number 2 and 3 is like how. They're applying, they're looking back in their story, or even with math. Remember I said I'm referring back to stories because I use this all the time with guided reading. It's a really good tool for guided reading. And then level 4 is making that connection beyond. And so just thinking about this, and because I know our class is for assessments, when you start to assess your scholars, you can put them within these 4 levels. I will start off at level 1 where you ask those basic questions, then move into level 2 and 3 where it starts to have them to apply what they're doing. It's kind of like I do, we do, you do, and then having them going beyond what you guys just learned, to think beyond, because then it sticks with them even more. So remember that the DOK system is just simply questioning the basics, looking at the evidence of what you just taught, and then having the students make those connections beyond what you taught. And so you can use those 4 different levels to really test how well your students are retaining what you just taught, because you want them to, have that greater knowledge of what you just taught them to go beyond, and it helps them to retain everything a little bit more. So that is all that I have for the DOK system. So remember that you can use it for planning, for questioning, and also for assessment. And it doesn't just have to be with reading. I know it works well with reading because you have that story in front of you and you can go back and read it and do different things like that. But it can also be used for math. If you're doing a problem, have them just recite the problem, what the problem is, and then have them tell you the steps of how to solve that problem. And then number 4, how can that problem or the concept of math that you're teaching help them beyond the classroom in the real world? Because as we know, scholars are always asking, like, why do I need to know this? Well, this is why you need to know it, because it'll help you beyond. And so I love the DOK system because it helps them to go deeper into what they're learning. And so that is the end for the DOK system. Thank you.